Okay, well, my camera shut down on me on my new phone, so I'm now using my old phone again. I'm hoping I can tell the rest of this story in one go. It's going to end up being in three parts instead of two. Anyway, here we go. Where I left off with the old phone, my Uncle Bill and the other men he was fighting with in the war, they had rooted the Germans out of a small town somewhere in Europe, I don't know where. And they had a firefight and everything. They'd taken over the town, and the town was still intact because the Germans hadn't had a chance to destroy it. They were taken by surprise. So my uncle and his buddies, they decided they were going to enjoy the town because there was a nice hotel there, and there was either a winery or a distillery, I don't know which. I know there were big swimming pool-sized vats of wine, because as I said in the other video, one of Bill's friends was swimming in them, you know. And anyway, they spent a few days there resting up. They stayed in the hotel. They got to sleep in nice beds and everything and have, all the amenities of home, which they weren't used to, having been fighting in this war. It was pretty tough for them most of the time. So they had this town. They had the run of it because there was nobody there but them. And so it was this 3 days or 4 days or something of just resting up and, and I guess drinking and eating and just having a good time, basically, which they really needed. At the end of their time there, when it was time to start marching again, when real life had to kick in again, they destroyed the town because they didn't want the enemy, the Germans, circling around and coming back there or anything. They didn't want there to be anything to come back to. So they, destroyed anything that would be of any use there, including the distillery. Now, one of the things they did is they drained these big vats of wine. Whatever was left in there, they drained it out. And when they did that, in one of these vats of wine, in the bottom of the thing, there was a dead German officer. See, there were catwalks all around these vats of wine. And, of course, this German officer had probably been shot in the firefight and fallen into the vat of wine dead. And he was in the bottom of it there. And the fella that had been swimming in there and taking big mouthfuls of it and stuff, that fella saw that. He saw the dead officer in the bottom of the vat of wine, and I guess the guy was pretty sick anyway. He puked when he saw that, It bothered him so much, like it would anybody, really. But that was one story my uncle had told my dad. Another story that my uncle told my dad was about him and his buddies. They were on the march, and they come across this tree that had been felled across the road, this big tree. And they were going to have to move it before they could continue. Now, of course, sometimes that'd be a trap, but they checked the area out really good, or so they thought they had anyway, and there was no sign of anything or anybody, so they decided before they moved this big tree, because that was going to be a big job, they just sit down and have something to eat and a smoke or whatever, have a bit of a rest. So my uncle, my great uncle Bill, he's sitting on sitting on the trunk of this tree that had been felled across the road, and there's a fella beside him by the name of Smith, and of course, being Smith, everybody called him Smitty. And my uncle's talking away to this guy. The guy's just sitting there beside him, quiet. And my uncle's talking to him. And Smitty's not answering. He's just sitting there and he's not answering. He's just kind of looking ahead, Well, my uncle got kind of annoyed with him. And he gave him a slap on the back. And he said, "Well, what's wrong with you, Smitty? Cat got your tongue." Give him a slap on the back. Well, when he did that, my uncle's hand went right into the guy's back. And he pulled it out just covered in blood and guts and everything. And what had happened was there had been a sniper up in a nearby tree, And the sniper had shot this Smitty fellow, shot him through the front, and of course had basically blown his back out. The sniper had a silencer on his gun, so they didn't have any idea. The guy was sitting there dead, and my uncle was talking away to him, and his back was all blowing out basically, and my uncle had no idea until he slapped him on the back, and his hand went right into him. So, that was another story. That's kind of a gross one, but those things did happen, and there's a reason why those guys were so badly traumatized. I mean, when things like that happen to you, that's got to stay with you. That's the sort of thing that will never leave you. So that was another story that my uncle had told my dad. The final story, at least the final one I can think of right now, I may think of others later, I don't know, but this is another one I have on my mind right now anyway. If I think of more, I'll share them too in another video, but I got a bit of a... At this time of the year, I guess the weather's getting to me a bit. Anyway, this other story... My uncle, for a little while, had to work in a prisoner of war camp over there. And this prisoner of war camp was in an old prison. It was actually a jail, basically, over there. And it was quite an old jail. And it was a depressing place. It wasn't a nice place, anyway. And nobody wanted to do that job, but everybody had to take their turn at it. And when my uncle's time came, he had to go and be a guard in this camp. For a period of time, he had to do that. And what they used to do is, because, the German prisoners really outnumbered the Allied soldiers that were guarding them. The only thing that gave the Allied soldiers any advantage at all is the Allied soldiers were armed and the prisoners weren't. But the Allied soldiers knew that the prisoners could take that place away from them anytime they decided to. And sometimes they'd have a prisoner of war in there, a German prisoner of war, who would prove to be a leader to the other men. And he'd start stirring things up, and he'd start really trying to get an uprising going, trying to get an insurrection going. And whenever they had a guy like that, they couldn't put up with that because they couldn't have an insurrection. They couldn't have that. So what they'd do is, if they had a man like that in there that was stirring up trouble and just trying to get an insurrection going, trying to be a leader to the other men, they'd take that fella out and they'd walk him back through the woods to a pit that they had dug, and they'd shoot him to death. Well, my uncle hated that. He didn't like shooting an unarmed man. That always really bothered him. And he had told my dad that he had nightmares about that. He'd see the faces of the men that he had shot and under those kinds of circumstances. And he was just racked with guilt over that, Had terrible nightmares about it. And my Aunt Verna actually said the same thing, that he used to wake up, just in a bad state. And just having nightmares after the war. Anyway, what had happened was my uncle and an American soldier, a soldier from the U.S. Army that was working there with him. Of course, my uncle was with the Canadian Army. Really, I think the Canadian Army was still part of the British Army, but I'm not 100% certain of that. But he was with the Canadian soldiers anyway. But this other fellow was a U.S. Army man. And my uncle and this other fella, they got the job of taking this German prisoner back to the pit to shoot him. And it was a terrible, miserable, rainy, sleety, cold, damp, just a nasty day, one of those days that's not good for anything, weather-wise. They're walking this man back there to shoot him, and he knew where they were going and why they were going there. And of course he was nervous. That's kind of understandable given what was about to happen. And what did he start to do? He started talking about the weather. This is something we all do, I guess. It's just in us to talk about the weather. If we can't think of anything else to talk about, That's the fallback position, and that's what he did. And so he's talking about the weather. He's saying, oh, terrible, terrible day. Terrible. Raining, cold, just awful. And this American soldier, my uncle, wasn't saying very much. I guess he was kind of nodding, agreeing. Yeah, you're right. Not a nice day. But the American fella, he listened to that for a while. And he says, just shut up and quit your complaining. It's us that's got to walk back in it. And my uncle, he said he couldn't stand that fella after that. He just couldn't stand him. He thought it was just the most ignorant thing, that they're taking this man back there to kill him. And that's what the man said to him anyway. And he didn't like that. He hated to be doing what he was doing in the first place. And he just really, he resented that American soldier for being that way, Now, when I was telling that story, I did think of one more, and this was what my Aunt Verna told me this story, who was Bill's wife, my great Aunt Verna. Apparently, when Bill and the guys he was with, when they were fighting in Italy, they got into a situation where they were pinned down by Axis forces, by German and Italian forces. And they were kind of surrounded anyway, and it wasn't looking too good for them. And what they ended up doing is they took refuge in a crypt in a cemetery. And they were surrounded in there. And in fact, my Aunt Verna,